I'd like to call this meeting to order. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jim Hart, and I'm the Chair of the Toronto Police Services Board. I welcome all of you to this hybrid meeting of our board. I will now read the land acknowledgement. Although this meeting is taking place virtually, we acknowledge that the land we're on as we hold this meeting is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people. The board also acknowledges that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed by the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed by multiple Mississauga and Chippewa bands. Members, any declarations of interest on the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, we'll move forward. Before we begin today's meeting, I'd like to pay tribute to Burnaby RCMP Constable Shailin Yang, who was killed in the line of duty on October the 18th, 2022. From what we know, her tragic death occurred while Constable Yang, a member of the Mental Health and Homeless Outreach Team, was attempting to help a vulnerable member of the community, a true testament to her kindness and dedication to her duty. Constable Yang was a truly dedicated police officer, compassionate, committed, who sincerely cared about helping her community and making a positive difference in the lives of those to whom she took the vow to serve and protect. Constable Yang was a loving and very loved sister, a wife, a daughter, whose ability to love was legendary, someone with an extraordinary gift for lifting others up. Jovial and calm, nurturing and selfless to her core, she always put others before herself. Her decision to dedicate her life to the service as a police officer was clearly a reflection of this generous and caring spirit. Though Constable Yang tragically died at such a young age, in her short years she made a tremendous impact on those who had the privilege of knowing her. Constable Yang, a hero in life, has left a powerful, loving legacy that will live on forever in the RCMP and in the communities she served, as well as within the greater policing community. She touched numerous people in her life, and without a doubt has made a real and lasting impact on so many. Any loss in law enforcement is keenly and intensely felt by all policing colleagues. Our hearts are with the members of the police services across Canada as we honor Constable Yang's tremendous contribution to her community, her remarkable bravery, her incredible ultimate sacrifice in the name of public safety. I would now ask that we all take a moment of silence, please, to honor Constable Yang. Thank you. And I'll turn the meeting over to the board's Executive Director and Chief of Staff, Ryan Teschner. Mr. Teschner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to everyone who has joined us in person, as well as those who have called into this meeting. Please note that this meeting is also being live streamed on the Toronto Police Service YouTube account and will be available there at the conclusion of this meeting. Joining us in person, we have Chair Jim Hart, Mayor John Tory, Vice Chair Francis Nunziata, Member Lisa Kostakis, Member Ainsworth Morgan, Member Ann Morgan. We also have members of our board office staff, Chief Raymer and his command team, members of the service, and of course, as always, welcome to members of the public. We have individuals who have registered to make deputations, both in person as well as virtually on our agenda items. As per our regular meeting process, deputations will be heard prior to the item being discussed and considered by board members. When it comes time to do a deputation, those who have registered will be called upon or brought into the meeting by our colleague Du Buchanan-Gisser. As always, deputants will speak, followed by an opportunity for board members to ask them questions. Normally, Mr. Chair, I would turn it back over to you at this point, but today is a special day. And so before we begin today's meeting formally, I want to acknowledge that today marks the last board meeting for you, Chair Hart, who retires after more than 3 years as chair of this board. There are many people who you're going to hear from now, so this is the batting order, beginning, please, with Vice Chair Nunziata.
Thank you. Wow, it's your last board meeting, Jim. How do you feel? Well, it is an honor for me to speak today as we pay tribute to Chair Jim Hart. I have had the privilege of working alongside Jim during the entirety of his time as chair, and I've had the opportunity to see firsthand his excellent professional and balanced leadership style and the impact it has had on police governance and policing in this city. Under Chair Hart, we have seen enhanced accountability and transparency for policing in Toronto. He has been an inspiring leader and a voice of reason, balance, and principle. He has worked hard to ensure that we hear from all members of Toronto communities, those who support our decisions along with those who do not, treating everyone with respect, courtesy, and dignity. On a personal note, I've had the pleasure of working with Jim at the city level in Parks and Recreation, municipal licensing, and as city councillor. Jim, we've worked together for many, many years with the new city of Toronto, and thank you for your contribution to the city. Jim, on behalf of the board, I want to wish you all the very best as you enter your retirement. You have worked so hard to make the policing services we deliver to the residents of this city more innovative, more equitable, and more compassionate and more efficient. Through your incredible contributions you have made, our city is better in so many ways. You have our deep respect and our endless gratitude. Thank you, Jim, for your contribution over the years, and you will be missed. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Mayor Tory.
Well, Jim, I can't add much to what Francis said, but and I don't have as lengthy a history because I was, I guess you had retired just, maybe I'm just looking back on it, maybe there was a coincidence. You were retiring just as I became mayor from the public service. I've been elected and you retired, so I'm just thinking back on that and wondering what that was all about. But I did have a chance to work with you because as fate had it, you became a city councillor, and I'm sure that's probably the last thing you expected ever to become once you retired from the public service. And you were the same as a city councillor as you were, I'm told, as a public servant, but as you were as chair of the board, and that is a person of extreme balance. I mean, to use the word by extreme balance, I mean that it was consummate balance. And that is so important in all of these jobs, whether it's the job I hold or Francis holds or that you did as a public servant or as chair of this board. Complete integrity. I never had to worry, not that I would have with your predecessor or anybody else, I never had to worry about the basis upon which you would make decisions, and when you had any doubt in your mind, you would canvass the board members, and I think that's the true mark of a great leader, is that you don't have to canvass necessarily, but you did. Collegiality, and the collegiality part is important because, again, there's a question of balance that comes in. You can be collegial but without sacrificing the important oversight responsibilities we have, and I think you achieved that, from my observations every single day. And, if you look at these troubled times that we're in, and if you look at the sort of polarization that's out there, you look at even sometimes when it comes to police-community relations, and not being critical of anybody for this, the challenge that goes with some of the strongly held views that are out there of all different kinds, and I'm not diminishing any of them, you were just what was needed to sort of keep things calm, but to make sure everybody was listened to, and to make sure that we could, perform this important oversight role, but at the same time be supportive of the incredibly difficult job the police have to do. And so I was always jealous of the fact that I would call sometimes and you actually would be out playing golf. And I have I worked for Ted Rogers, who hated golf because he thought it was a waste of time. I am not among those. I was just jealous, that's all. I'd love to be out playing golf, but I hope you have many golf games and happy times ahead. As I said to you just in the elevator on the way down, this is yet another of your retirements. And I'm confident at some point in time, if any of us came calling in the interest of the public, you'll answer, I'm sure. But for this chapter, I just say a profound word of thanks on behalf, I'm sure, of all the people of the City of Toronto. If they had any idea how important your job was and how well you carried it out, they would all be here in person to thank you, because it's just such an important job and you did it so well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. I'm now going to turn it over to our other board members, beginning with Ann Morgan.
Jim, I've been in the public service my entire career, And once in a while, you meet somebody like you who embodies everything that makes you a stellar individual to live your life and to dedicate your life to public service. And I often thought you're a person we could even send to the Middle East to do peace talks because of your diplomacy and your ambassadorial skills. Jim, in my time on the board, I seen you with a superb skill set of communication, negotiation, strategic planning. You have impeccable integrity and judgment. But what resonated most with me is your humility and your kindness to everyone, both on the board, the command team, and just to the public at large. You made my onboarding so easy. You were always available for a chat or advice or resources I need. And it's been very inspiring for me to work with this incredible board and the command team who have very diverse backgrounds, but we all seem to have common goals. And I think one of the reasons we have that kind of synchronicity and a real laudable output is because of your guidance and your sage advice and your oversight. And that's what makes us, I think, such a well-functioning board. It's been an honor and privilege for me to work with all of you, but especially you, Jim. And I wish you well in your future endeavors, your trips hopefully to sunnier climates, golf, your friends and family, and please don't be a stranger. And again, it's been an honor and a privilege to work with you.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan. Noticing a theme, golf keeps coming up. Over to you, Ms. Kostakis.
So Jim, I believe I've seen your name around being in the sector, in the nonprofit sector, for about 35 years now. So your name was around in the city and the councilors, and I'm a little bit of an advocate, but also maybe a bit of an activist, as the mayor might attest to, with the city hall reps and our service public members. I'm humbled to be here, never mind to be in the presence of people with such skill sets and compassion. So I think everyone spoke to, and I'll echo that, so it doesn't start sounding like a eulogy, because you're not going. We're still going to be in touch with you. Just that when you deal with people, and it's a learning tool, and I think a mentoring piece that I'm going to take with me, is that you respond, you respect, and you value and dignify people, no matter what they come at you with, or just in every level of any form of relationship that I've seen you with the command team, with just the service in general, and the caring and compassion. It's sincere, it's from the heart, and that's all we can ask for when someone is serving and protecting and really guiding, and the leadership is just exemplary, your skills. So thank you very much for everything that I've learned and keep learning from the way that you present yourself and the way that you respond and treat people with that humanity. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Ainsworth.
Last but not least. Jim.
Not last.
Not last.
Definitely not last.
Definitely not last. Okay. All right. I just wanted to, this is coming into my third year. I can't believe it's already in January, being on the board. And since the onset, you're very welcoming to me and onboarding me on sort of that professional realm, but also being able to have private conversations and get some direction and advice. So on that personal level, I want to say thank you, and I appreciate that. The other piece I want to really share is the fact that even in disagreement, there's the ability to be reflective, and I've always appreciated that about you. And often, upon second look and looking at different perspective, take that into your understanding. So I appreciate that approach in your leadership. I wish you and your family all the best in retirement. I think, public service is not always easy, and it takes a lot of toll on family. And I know that they'll be more than happy to have you around. And I wish you nothing but the best in wherever the next chapter takes you.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Now a blast from the not-so-distant past. If we can please ask former Vice Chair Marie Molinar to say a few words. Doobie?
Thank you. Wow. You know, Jim, I'm listening to this and I can feel from 693 kilometers away the love in the room. It's really quite remarkable, and everyone is speaking about what I've always considered to be your essence, the essence of being human. And others will speak about your accomplishments as chair, but the honor I'm being given today to acknowledge your role is something I really feel very privileged to be able to do. Because what you did when you were chair while I was vice chair alongside you was you really made people feel important. And how you make people feel when you're the chair of the board is really, at the end of the day, perhaps the most significant thing. And you brought, and some qualities have been mentioned, but I'll mention others. You knew how to listen. You know how to listen. I always felt that you listened. You heard what was being said. You processed it. You reflected it back. I would watch this with the many debutants. And they would come to the table and come to the table today, perhaps, with grief and anger. And often that makes people uncomfortable, but you made a point of making sure that every board member's voice was heard and every debutant was heard. And in those moments, I think you really understood that your role as chair was to listen deeply, and that's a really rare gift. And you also brought another quality, which is that the behavior you demonstrate generates trust. And I observed this as vice chair, that the trust that you generated was shared by many people, including Chief Raymer. And of course, when you do that, trust carries a weight of responsibility, but it's a feature of your tenure that I hope you can pass on to the next chair, because we've all seen it. When the chief and the chair trust each other, the work gets done well. And the last ingredient that I think you bring to the table, which has been mentioned, is respect. And I really felt this from you when I was vice chair. I could bring wacky ideas to the table, ideas that weren't very traditional perhaps, and I would do that without fear, because I felt that you respected me and would give me time and would consider them. And sometimes you even encourage them. So as you head off to live in or near a small town, I think these qualities that you have, your ability to listen, the way you build relationships of trust, the way you cultivate respect, I think those are going to hold you in good stead, because I live in a small town, and they're really important bridges as you go from this highly public role to a much, perhaps more bucolic existence in the countryside. You set the bar so high in terms of how personal relationships must thrive, and I know from what we've heard today how important it is that going forward, both the chair of the board and the chief get along in the public eye, but also maintain a visible, healthy tension. And you were able to do that, and to show the public and the service that healthy tension. So I want to end by acknowledging one particular accomplishment which is dear to me, and that's the board and the service's efforts in the field of mental health reform and policing. I live in a family, as you know, that's faced significant health and mental health challenges. And whenever I hear about an interaction that's gone wrong between the police and the community, I know it could have been a member of my family. So I'm so grateful to you, to your colleagues on the board, and to Chief Raymer. And I just want to take a moment to applaud Chief Raymer as he too departs. Jim Raymer, your time as chief, and I'm saying this from a distance, has been exceptional and remarkable for the quality of your leadership and your integrity. So that's my kudos to you. But on the mental health front, you both persisted in defining the right role for police officers when facing members of the community who have difficulty regulating their emotions. So on that note, I'm going to end with this little ode to the Jims, I'm calling it. When all is said and done, may both Jims bask in shared battles won. I wish you and your families much peace and quiet times ahead, and maybe a little bit of golf. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Thanks, Marie. Meant a lot. Thank you.
We really appreciate you chiming in. Thank you so much. Well, one of the two Jims that were part of that ode is next, Chief Raymer.
No, thanks, Ryan. Let me just begin by saying that, from my perspective, Terry, you've just done an outstanding job. And, when I think to back when I was appointed, the way you and Marie welcomed me into the position meant quite a lot. And I immediately, what I learned, it reaffirmed for me really the importance of police governance and oversight in policing, the importance of it. And I really very much appreciated, your wisdom, your counsel, and in particular, your friendship. And I think, as you go forward into your future endeavors, I think really there's an opportunity for the publics and the members of the service to really realize that you try to strike a balance and really do what is best for the community and best for policing. I'll have more to say this afternoon, but those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And I might now, if it's all right with you, Mr. Chair, take a couple of moments, and you should probably consider this to be remarks that are not really just mine, but our whole team, who you've come to know and have worked with every day. Let's start with a little bit of history. Jim began his career in government in 1983, working for the Metropolitan Toronto Housing Company. And during his time with the city, Jim worked in a variety of divisions, areas, and roles, including the Director of Council and Support Services, the Director of Executive Management, the Director of Business Organization and Review, becoming the Executive Director of Municipal Licensing and Standards in 2008. In 2011, Jim was selected as the General Manager of Parks, Forestry, and Recreation, later retiring the first time from that position in 2014. Some would call his career robust. But retirement was not to last long. In June 2017, Jim was appointed to City of Toronto Council as a representative for Ward 44, Scarborough East, to complete the term of the late Councillor Ron Mosier, during which time he first served on this board as a member. On July 16, 2019, Toronto City Council again appointed Jim to the board, and at its meeting of October 22, 2019, just over 3 years ago, the board elected Jim as its chair, a position he has held since that time. For those of us lucky enough to have worked with Jim, we have been struck by his admirable work ethic, his progressive and visionary leadership, and his good-natured attitude. He has continuously demonstrated a deep and sincere appreciation for the work of this service's members, the members of the board, and the members of our team in the office of the Toronto Police Services Board. Jim, your leadership has been bold, always searching to find constructive ways to make our collective work better, more efficient, more effective, and more accountable to the members of all communities across the city. Your work as chair in helping to formulate and steer our ongoing reform strategy has been premised on ensuring it meaningfully impacts all that we do and the collaborative, community-focused approach we take to community safety in all of the city's neighborhoods. There is no doubt that the principles you have worked so diligently to highlight as chair, the need to clearly recognize the extraordinary work of our service members and the work they do every day, the enhanced accountability and a reimagining of what community safety means to Torontonians, and a true commitment to building a culture of sustained learning, respect, collaboration, and innovation. All of these will continue beyond your departure. You will definitely be missed, both personally and professionally, and I will miss working with you tremendously. The mark of any good leader is seen not only in the leader, but as much in the team that they have around them. I can say sincerely that as a professional doing work that all of us in the office are passionate about, you've always allowed us to go for it. We have felt supported to be bold, to try new things, and we always knew that you had our back. For that, and for the many ways you have supported this whole team. Thank you. When someone moves on to a next chapter, we often start hearing the word legacy. But even legacies can erode if they are not sufficiently embedded, tied to a strong foundation, able to stand the test of time. Your legacy, Jim, will never erode. Through your lifetime of public service and service to the Toronto Police Service and Board, through your honest and genuine commitment to doing what is right and best for the people of the organizations you have led, worked with, and for, through your deep love of this city and its people. For all of these reasons, your legacy will endure. Your invaluable contributions will enrich this organization and this city for all the years to come. Thank you for building this legacy, and we all commit to working to honor it in all that we continue to do. We wish you a wonderful next chapter, filled with good time with Joan and your family, and of course, your new granddaughter, Charlotte, and golf. Lots of golf. Thank you.
I guess over to me now. Lots of surprises today already. Sherry kept a lot of this to herself, so I wrote up some remarks based on what I thought might happen. And it won't flow necessarily perfectly, but there you go. I just want to thank everybody for their very kind words. I know we have to get to the deputants, so I don't want to spend too much time saying thank you, but I have to say thank you. First of all, I have to say thank you to the mayor. Your exceptionally kind words this morning. When we first met in 2017, you've been nothing but kind and supportive to me all the way, and I really appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor. You provided me with several opportunities as a councillor that broadened my scope, and being appointed by council to this board was just one of them. The city is very lucky to have you as mayor, and I feel very lucky to have gotten to know you. Vice Chair Nunziata, who I've known the longest, I believe since, if memory serves me right, I think, like Moses, I think 1988, I'm pretty sure it was 1988 when I first met you, over 3 decades ago. I want to thank you for taking on the role of Vice Chair. I really enjoyed working with you, and I enjoyed the many, many chats that we had offline about a variety of issues. It was truly a lot of fun to work with you, Francis. Thanks so much. Chief Raymer, what can I say about a superior police chief? You've made my job really easy. You're open, you're honest, and your integrity is second to none. You know how to speak truth to power, and the decision-making process is so much easier when you know you've got the straight goods. I wish you the very best in the next chapter of your life, and I hope our paths cross many times. Ryan, you and I have spent a lot of time discussing a lot of issues over the last 3 years. Some of them pretty straightforward, some of them not so much. I want to tell you I'm going to miss those discussions and developing strategies together on various matters. I think we've made a terrific team, and I've really enjoyed working with you. It's been an honor, my friend. I want to thank former Vice Chair Marie Molinar for her kind remarks and taking the time to call in today. That was a real surprise. Marie, it was a pleasure working with you. You opened my eyes, as you mentioned. You had some different ideas than me, without a doubt. But you opened my eyes to many, many things. And you're right, sometimes I agreed with you. And it was a real pleasure. I learned a lot from you, Marie. And thanks so much for calling in, especially from where you are now. And I miss you, my friend. Finally, to the board staff, you're a great team, comprised of fantastic talent, each and every one of you. But more importantly, you're terrific people. I'm going to miss every one of you. I'd be remiss, though, if I didn't give extra special thanks to my right hand, Sherry. You've been a constant support to me every day for the last 3 years. You're exceptional in the work that you do. Any success that I've had in this job is partly yours. You're terrific. I've said this a few times, but I wish every Torontonian had the chance to have the role that I've had for the last 3 years, to see deep inside this organization, to see the heroism, the compassionate actions of service members each and every day, and hope the media somewhere is listening to this last part of my speech. There are many, many stories that will stay with me forever, but in closing, I'm going to share 2 of them. I spoke to an officer who was struggling with an individual who was intent on going over a balcony. The officer had hold of this person, but wasn't sure if he could bring them to safety or not. The individual was intent on going over. At one point, the officer wasn't sure if he was going to go over as well. And what he said to me, I'll never forget. I thought I was going to go over, but one thing I wasn't going to do was let go. I said, wow, you're a true hero. He said, no, I'm just doing my job. Something I've heard from service members many, many, many times, our officer heroes. Second memory is a really simple story of kindness and compassion. An officer was driving downtown when he saw what appeared to be a homeless man lying on the sidewalk. He stopped his vehicle to see if the man was okay. Did he need medical attention? When he determined that he didn't, he helped the man up onto a park bench. And the man said, oh, thank you so much. He said, are you okay? I'm fine. I'm just a little bit hungry. The officer went to his car and gave him his lunch. Simple story, but tells you a lot about our officers. These are but two of the hundreds of stories that I've heard in this job, and I'm so thankful to have heard them. In closing, I'd like to say that it's been an honor and privilege to be chair of this board. This organization is second to none in policing worldwide, and Torontonians are extremely fortunate to have an amazing group of service members who truly put service before self. Thank you, everyone. Okay, that was the hardest job I've had to do in many years. Okay, over to the public agenda. We'll hear from the chief on his monthly update soon. Item number 1 is confirmation of the minutes of October the 11th. Motion to approve the minutes. Ms. Kostakis, seconder. Vice Chair Nunziata, all in favor. Any opposed? That carries. Item number 2 is a contract award to OnX Enterprise Solutions for information technology infrastructure, hardware, software, and services. We have a deputant on item 2, so that's held down. Item number 3.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, the deputant, I'm being advised, has not called in.
Oh, has not called in? Is that correct, Doobie? Okay, motion to approve item number 2, or anyone wish to hold it down?
I guess Mr. Flangfeld here now
Oh.
on this number.
Okay, so it's held down. The mayor would like to hold it down anyway, and we have a deputant, so that's held. Item number 3, Environics I can't even say the word. Analytics, there we go, contract extension. Boy, it's been a rough morning. That's held down for a deputant. Item number 4, special constable appointments and reappointments, November 2022. Item number 4, motion to approve. Ms. Morgan, seconder. Ms. Kostakis, all in favor. Any opposed? Item number 4 carries. Item number 5 is the budget variance reports. We have 3 deputants on item number 5, so that's held down. Item number 6, semi-annual report, publication of expenses, January the 1st to June 30th, 2022. 3 deputants on 6, that's held down. Item number 7, chief administrative investigative reports. There's a series of 4 reports. Motion to receive. Item number 7. Ms. Kostakis, seconder. Mr. Morgan, all in favor. Any opposed? That carries. And we thank Nicole Corrado for her written submission on item number 7. Item number 8 is correspondence to all Ontario Police Services Boards out of a September 22nd, 2022 letter from Pauline Rochefort, Chair of the East Ferris Police Services Board. That item is held down for deputation. So members will now move back to the beginning of the agenda. And the first item is item number 2, the contract award, and we have a deputation.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry, I skipped over that. Chief's update first. Sorry, Chief.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This month, I'll provide a brief update on our progress with respect to our use of major case management and power case. By way of background, you'll recall that in her missing and missed review, Justice Epstein identified the TPS's lack of compliance with the provincial standards as a significant deficiency in our investigations into missing persons and other serious offenses. I'll remind the public that the major case management system is used by all police services in Ontario to investigate crimes like homicides, sexual assaults, and abductions. It uses a software program called Power Case. It assists investigators with managing large volumes of information and by drawing linkages to serial offenders. It was mandated by the province in 2005. As I acknowledged publicly when Justice Epstein's report was released, our non-compliance was rooted in a belief that major case management and the use of the PowerCase software were too resource-intensive to be fully implemented by a service the size of the TPS. I said it then and I'll repeat it now. This attitude was short-sighted. It was adopted from the earliest days of the province's mandate, and fault for it rests at the highest levels of the organization, not with our investigators. We publicly committed to eliminating that culture and through a staged approach to achieving full compliance with provincial standards. We also committed to providing public updates on our progress. While former updates to the board are mandated, I want to use this opportunity to advise the public that we are making progress that has been led by our missing and missed implementation team. In spite of our ongoing staffing limitations, we have and will continue to reallocate resources to major case management. Most recently, we're in the process of filling 10 officer PowerCase indexer positions. These are critical positions as they ensure that PowerCase is used as the primary case management application, thus ensuring the widespread sharing of information with police services across the province. Additionally, we are increasing our capacity to conduct internal training on major case management and PowerCase. To that end, the Major Case Management section has created a PowerCase training lab within TPF's headquarters. It's the first training facility of its kind in the province, solely dedicated to small group training for specialized investigators and the use of PowerCase. It goes beyond what's offered at the Ontario Police College and provides an intimate educational environment that can readily address case-specific questions and needs of our investigative units. The use of the PowerCase lab has allowed us to expand training to detective sergeants and major case managers throughout the service. The lab has laid the groundwork for us to expedite compliance both within our investigative squad as well as for threshold offenses investigated at the divisional level. Justice Epstein made recommendations specific to notification to the Provincial Serial Predator Crime Investigations Coordinator. To this end, the Major Case Management section has developed and is currently hosting 2 webinar training sessions for TPS Major Case Managers. The training sessions are dedicated to the Serial Predator Crime Investigations Coordinator and the Major Case Manager's legislative obligations pertaining to it. While major case management and PowerCase represent but one area of work flowing from missing and missed, these latest initiatives provide a snapshot of the extensive work that the service is undertaking to implement the recommendations of Justice Epstein. I'll conclude my update by saying that while Justice Epstein provided the impetus for our renewed commitment to major case management, we are equally motivated by the fact that it's simply the right thing to do. It's the right thing for community safety because it enhances our ability to make linkages between offenses, to identify serial offenders, and to solve violent crimes. And it's the right thing for our membership because it provides them with better tools, better training, and it sets them up to succeed in their investigations. In fact, one of our homicide teams is currently participating in a pilot where they are now relying entirely on PowerCase, not only as an investigative tool, but also for the purpose of disclosing case files. This represents another significant step in our progress on this issue. Feedback from the investigators has been effusive in their praise and can be encapsulated in their own words. There's no turning back. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Any questions, board members, on the update? Seeing none, thank you, Chief. Okay, item number 2. Dewey, can you put on the deputy? That's a contract award to OnX.
Thank you. Before I begin, I raise a point of order. But for the second time in the last 6 months, this same group of 6 individuals here today failed to meet the legal requirements of a police board for the City of Toronto, as decreed by the Lieutenant Governor in accordance with the requirements of Section 27 sub 9 and 27 sub 11 of the Police Services Act. The Act and the Lieutenant Governor's declaration very explicitly require that Toronto have a 7-member police board consisting of, in addition to the head of the municipal council or their replacement, Section 27 sub 9b requires, quote, 2 members of the council appointed by resolution of the council, close quote. I put it to Jim Hart, who purports to be conducting today's charade here, to name the 2 Toronto City Councillors who are part of this meeting here today, or alternatively, to provide the legal basis for this group of 6 people fraudulently impersonating the statutorily defined entity of a 7-member police board. In the absence of any claimed legal basis for this action, I note for the record that any approvals, authorizations, or contracts purportedly entered into by this group are without legal force, and naturally, as a result, Toronto taxpayers, along with corporations or others who believe that they have been adversely affected, have full legal recourse for all losses and costs against the 6 individuals who are acting without lawful authority and without the statutory protection otherwise provided to public office holders under the Police Services Act. They have claim against these 6 individuals who are engaged in this fraudulent impersonation of a government agency. And I await Mr. Hart's response to that point of order if there is one.
There isn't one. Carry on.
Hearing now, I now move on to my 5 minutes on the agenda item I actually registered to speak on, item 2, the contract award to OnX Corporation, the $186.7 million contract. Under the heading Background Purpose on page 2, the report states that the contract is to deliver, quote, improvements and optimizations for a modern data centering system at a lower cost and increased flexibility, close quote. But the report never says is how much more or less than the projected $187 million contract the existing systems currently cost. Are taxpayers in reality being expected to pay an extra $100 million so that the IT department can put all their eggs into one basket through this deal? The report also talks about this scheme, quote, providing access to emerging technologies. And while we all know that all the kids today have to have the latest Model 27 iPhone and whatever gadgets, those paying attention also know that the latest, greatest emerging technologies of the past have included Betamax video, Microsoft Zoom, Clearview AI facial recognition, the Galaxy Note 7, known for burning down hotel rooms and airplanes, Thanos blood testing machines, the Blu-ray HD DVD wars, and a list that goes on and on. The last thing that most taxpayers want is a police department that spends almost $200 million to play guinea pig for the latest technological fad. Then on top of that, we have the report's disclosure of the fact that only 2 of the 61 folks that signed up to view the request for proposal even submitted bids on the project. We saw here a few months ago how we had a former TPS supplier before the board publicly complaining about Toronto police tailoring their bids to seemingly favor a particularly desired supplier. And now it comes as no surprise that after the board allowed that scheme to succeed, we see taxpayers being potentially ripped off for hundreds of millions of dollars by a proposal request once again seemingly designed to prevent competitive bids from being submitted. Last time we saw, what was it, 45 mandatory requirements? When we were told that industry standard is to have less than half a dozen such stipulations. And even in response to questions on that point, the service indicated that it had never previously issued a tender with more than 15 mandatory requirements. But we know that the board went on and approved that flawed tendering process then. And here again, we see 59 out of 61 potential suppliers indicating that the RFP was drafted so as to exclude them from being able to bid on the project. It's no wonder that this city is claiming it's near bankruptcy with the corrupt leadership supporting schemes like this. The fact is that this report does not even contain the necessary information for it to be properly approved. At bare minimum, the fact that it fails to provide any information about the cost of existing contracts, which this mere $200 million contract seeks to replace, makes any approval of this contract a blatant departure from generally accepted business practices. Indeed, the fact that only 59 of 61 potential suppliers were even able to meet the mandatory minimum requirements of this contract to even submit a bid to replace the Toronto's Police's entire IT infrastructure demonstrates a fatally flawed bidding process. And then on top of all those problems, there isn't even an opinion from some never before heard of fairness commissioner to provide taxpayers with at least some bare minimum of reason to believe that this near $200 million contract isn't just another shady deal for some folks to pocket more Toronto tax dollars. I call on the board to reject this contract and to direct that it be resubmitted for tendering anew, with subsequent public reporting on that retendered contract, providing public disclosure of existing system costs. That, what is it here? A $187 million contract seeks to replace. And then on top of all that, that there be included some independent opinion confirming that this expenditure is justified and that the bidding process was conducted fairly and in the taxpayers' best interest. I reserve the remainder of my time.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Langenfeld? Seeing none, thanks for your deputation. Mayor Tory, I believe you have questions.
I do, Mr. Chair, and I'll start with the process a reference to which was made by the deputant. Two questions on process to start off. First, it describes in this report that one submission did not meet all the mandatory requirements and was disqualified. And of course, there were only, I think I'm correct in saying, where did Mr. Oh, there, up there, sorry. That there were only two who qualified. What was the nature of the failure to qualify? Because it certainly complicates life to have only one person left.
It certainly does, sir, and that was a disappointment. The previous iteration of this procurement had only one vendor bid at all. And we were very constrained on the types of hardware that we would bid for. So everything had to be IBM or Cisco. What we've tried to do in this procurement is make it as accessible as possible to as many vendors as possible. And we solicited conversations with a series of vendors to try and engage them and encourage them to bid and not see us as a closed shop where we'd only deal with one. So we now take all device types and all technology types in this bid, so that there's a competitiveness in that. But what we're finding is that we're unable to have vendors that have the breadth of service that we need because our own IT and infrastructure capability is limited, and we need a higher degree of support from our vendors to put together the infrastructure that we're building. So that ask is difficult for many vendors to bid on. The 60 some odd that downloaded the bid, we wouldn't expect that level to be interested. That's just downloading it from Merck's. What we're looking at is sort of a handful, less than a half dozen of potential vendors that could even surface this kind of business. We had 2 responses. Unfortunately, I'm sure you're aware, writing RFPs is sometimes very sticky business. And they can get eliminated for relatively small issues that we can't go back and repair the RFP without making it uncompetitive in the process and being open to challenge. And that's what happened in this case.
And just, would you describe what ended up disqualifying them as a small, what did you just use just word small item or something like that? Was it a small item? Because I think it has big consequences, that's all, in terms of the optics of, if I can call it that.
I don't recall what the nonconformance was. I'm sorry, this happened 6 months ago, so I'm not aware of what the nonconformance was, but I was informed by procurement that they couldn't proceed.
So then the next question I would have, which I would have thought might be operative here in any event, but I think certainly might have become more operative in light of what just happened, that you just described, the elimination of the one other competitor, would be a fairness opinion. Can you tell me why there wasn't anybody that was asked to write a fairness opinion about this, given that it ended up in effect being a sole source contract of this magnitude?
We don't make it a matter of course to engage a fairness commissioner in all of our procurements. And this is a repeated procurement that we're running every 5 years for all of our IT infrastructure. It wasn't seen as a necessary step, and we've taken a number of measures to try and make this more competitive. I think the issue is that we have a limited set of vendors that can supply us with the level of support that we need, and that gives the appearance of uncompetitiveness. We're trying to move that as much as possible. But the challenges that I've put in front of the infrastructure team of overcoming the challenges we've had with the physical plant, which the board is aware of, but also modernizing our infrastructure. They're not going to be able to do that alone. They need to switch to a value-added reseller as opposed to a vendor of record. We can't just buy the hardware. We need to have support in how to use it, how to modernize, how to get into higher security, cloud backups, lower cost backups. There's quite an extensive amount of work that's going on around the rationalization of our infrastructure. And that rationalization is ultimately going to make us more flexible and more capable, but we're on a journey to get there. So the Fairness Commissioner wasn't engaged at this stage. Perhaps with hindsight we might have, but I sort of feel that this was consistent. Sorry.
If I may, our current purchasing bylaw is silent on when to use a fairness commissioner and not. We do often rely on the city's guidance on that. One of the considerations here is that this isn't net new requirements. This, as Colin mentioned, this is ongoing operational procurement that we do run quite routinely. Having said that, this is one of the amendments. There's a number of amendments we're contemplating in the purchasing bylaw, because for those of you know that we put it in place in 2019, 2020. And so now with the benefit of actually using the bylaw for a year or two, this is an area that we do realize we need to just clarify and amend exactly when do you use it, when do you not, to better align with the city's guidance.
Forgive me, Chair, I do have quite a few questions on this because it's a big contract and the circumstances too. Can either of you answer for me what because you made reference, Mr. Sayers, to the fact that this wasn't an instance in which the decision was made to have a fairness commissioner, and what is the criteria, or what has been, is there just no criteria at all? I mean, you just decide on a case-by-case basis.
The bylaw is silent today on it, and so
But you've had them before, haven't you?
we have had one in the past with guidance and collaboration with City Legal as well on when it's.
And was City Legal brought into this and asked the question of whether it would be advisable in light of how things turned out that there should be a fairness?
I don't know if that specific question was asked, but we do liaise on all of these fronts with City Legal. But this specific question on whether a fairness commissioner should have been used at the outset is something I'll follow up on.
All right. I'm not. When I say I'm not satisfied, I don't think those are the best answers we could have received, but having said that, I can just move on to a couple other questions so I don't use up too much time. It's unclear from the report, and I will say, and look, I try to be supportive of public servants and police officers and everybody else. This report does not answer the question, unless I missed it, of what the net additional cost is. It talks about the two numbers, the 86.4 million on capital, and it says 82.9 million is funded. If I'm reading that correctly, then it would suggest it's only $4 million in additional capital that wasn't in the plan, but I don't think that's probably true. And then it goes down to the operating impact of 86.3 million for the 1 year, I guess. No. Some of it included in the 23 budget. But could you just help me with, because it then says here the total operating budget impact is estimated at 86.3 million for the duration of the contract. Is that an extra 86.3 million, or is that money that otherwise would have been offset by some other amount that would have been spent? Like, what is the financial impact of this on the police service, on both capital and operating?
So this is a procurement for the services. The budgeting is a separate exercise in which we are holding steady on operating and capital. So we're not spending any more money on this infrastructure. What we're trying to do is use that money more wisely by modernizing the infrastructure that we are buying. The infrastructure, the data centers that we're running on sort of 10 to 15-year-old principles. We're trying to bring those up to modern standard, and we're trying to do that on the same spend as we've had historically. So we're holding completely steady on both operating and capital.
If I understand that answer, then I like it better than the last one, because you've got to be fair on the ones you don't like and the ones you do like. I think I understand you correctly to say that this doesn't really involve any significant additional amount of funding, capital or operating, but it involves better spending of the same money. Is that
is absolutely correct, sir.
Okay, well, that's a good answer. Then, just to come to the last question I would have for the moment, which is, The report, again, aside from making these references to, people working together and whatnot, the bundled services and infrastructure planning and all that, it doesn't set out what the benefits are of this financially, and it doesn't set out the benefits to police work. Like police work as in, how is the average officer or the average civilian person who's working in here going to benefit from this in the context of us being able, for the investment of all this money, to see better policing or better administration of the police service, and what are the financial benefits? I think you've answered the first question maybe by saying, well, there may not be a benefit in terms of some big saving, but we're not spending any more, but we're going to get a better result. But could you just address what the benefits are? Because they're really not mentioned in here. I mean, in any way that a non-IT person could understand.
Sure.
Which I certainly count myself as one.
And this is deep in the infrastructure, so it is very nerdy, techie stuff in terms of benefits. We're talking about cloud backup storage, going from 2 data centers that are redundant to each other to 1 data center that's backed up in the cloud. We're talking about security infrastructure to allow us to have more SaaS solutions, which are solution as a service, which are more modern types of solutions. So a lot of those things are happening and are part of the modernization effort in the rationalization. But as you say, they're very techy. So to make something really, how is this affecting the cops on the front line? We recently had a great success by having the pushpin and bail compliance dashboard. And we invited Durham to join us in sharing data around bail compliance. That was used at a couple events recently, and it helped us identify individuals who were in violation of bail conditions and were subsequently arrested. That made the public safer and made the officers' jobs easier. That is sitting on cloud infrastructure that is shared and allows us to share between ourselves and Durham. And that partnership is a model for increasing that partnership across York, across Peel, and all of our adjacent agencies. So that's what sort of the tangible effect of this type of flexibility is. Again, super nerdy. I want to say a thank you to my team of nerds, because they're doing awesome work in modernizing and having a lot of fun doing it. You guys know who you are. But the impacts are very diffuse at the policing level and very acute in terms of modernizing our infrastructure.
That's all I have for now. Thank you, Chair.
Other questions, board members? I've got a couple, Colin. In terms of out of scope, requirements were out of scope for some suppliers or for many suppliers. Was that because I assume the magnitude of the project was too large for many suppliers? Would that be fair or not?
I'm not sure I understand the question, sir. Just let me.
In terms of the suppliers that could not bid or did not bid at the end of the day, or were not deemed to be qualified, it's because of the magnitude of the project. These firms just couldn't deliver on something this big. Is that reasonable or not reasonable?
I would say it's more a question of skills and capabilities. It's one thing to buy a computer. It's another thing to buy the expertise to secure it, to integrate it into a platform, to understand how that data center computer is going to relate to the cloud service that you're trying to integrate it with to create a capability. So there are vendors who sell the boxes, and there are vendors who sell consulting and support. To be able to bring those two things together and provide it as a packaged service to the TPS, that is something that is more unique. There are certainly services that do that, but that's the competitive space that we're looking at, because we don't have the capability any longer to do that entirely ourselves.
You talked about budget to budget. Basically, it's a flat line. It's fitting within the existing budget. On the top of page 3, you note cost avoidance through consolidation. There's a list of things here which seems to infer that by moving in this direction, there'll actually be some savings. Am I reading that correctly or not? Or is it simply a flat budget to budget?
Yes, there is a significant cost avoidance. So one of the major examples is our ballooning storage costs. We have as you can imagine, video, data, documents, everything's electronic, and we're retaining everything indefinitely. And the depth and weight of our data objects is increasing on a regular basis. So as we're riding that asymptotic curve up, our costs are increasing with it. To be able to buy offline storage, cloud storage, and what we'll call deep freeze storage. So we don't expect that we're ever going to be using this stuff, but we need a low-cost storage mechanism to be able to store this data in case it should ever be needed for the courts or for some other process that's similar. Those types of tiers of storage are being created through this vehicle, and that is going to offset a lot of storage buys that are going to have to come in the future. There's very significant savings there.
Is there any way to quantify the magnitude of those savings or not?
There's no line to measure it against because it's a growth curve and it's a projection. But we're talking in the tens of millions over the terms of this contract.
And you mentioned Durham. Is Durham doing similar things to us or not?
I think we're leading in the infrastructure innovation. There's a lot of folks watching Toronto on the infrastructure to see what we're up to. And moving to cloud comes with all sorts of new security challenges. So as we're making those changes, we're leading in terms of security and cybersecurity of our infrastructure as well.
Just one last question. You mentioned that the last time out, I think there was one qualified bid. Is that correct? And one qualified bid this time, correct? Was the same situation last time or not 5 years ago?
No.
Similar in the sense that there's very few people that can do this work.
So I just, last time only one bidder.
Only one bidder, period.
This time, two bidders submitted, but one had issues with their bid, and it was cut on because of form.
Okay, just one other question. If this wasn't approved today, what's the consequence of that?
So those cost avoidance issues are going to still be there, and we're going to continue to have to try to modernize our infrastructure without the level of support that we need. It will delay our rationalization.
Actually, another one came to mind. Sorry. In terms of the Fairness Commissioner, have you looked at the City of Toronto's policy with regard to Fairness Commissioners and when they're used and an attempt to mirror that or not? Where are we with regard to how we employ a Fairness Commissioner versus when the city would do that?
We have a board report that will be coming forward in the new year to align with the use. We know the absolute dollar value is usually $5 million and over, but there's other pieces. And so there is a report coming with some suggested amendments around that.
Okay, thank you. That's my last question. Speakers or questions?
Sorry, I had a couple more because I didn't turn the page in my own book. When it said here that OnX meets the minimum scoring threshold of 75%, did they get 75? Like, in other words, they just made the minimum? Like, or did they do better than that? Again, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of now there's one bidder left. You went to have an evaluation of those people after they were the only bidder left. And did they just meet the minimum, or did they do better than that?
They beat the minimum, sir.
They beat it, well, by 1 point or by 10
No,
points?
by significantly.
Okay. And then the other thing is, and I take note of the fact that there is no complaint, because quite often with these kinds of things, when somebody gets disqualified, we get a complaint. We've had it here before. There is no complaint. What was the response of the people who were disqualified?
So we didn't get a complaint. In the previous procurement, we did get a complaint from, I believe it was Dell, who felt that because we were locking out the device type, that they felt that was uncompetitive. This time we've opened that up. So vendors of boxes, of infrastructure, can sell their products through this reseller. And that makes it a more competitive environment to be able to, and it allows us to move into many different types of infrastructure. So as I say, that increases the competitiveness, and that was by design in this round. And that's helped to avoid the complaints about the process that we had in the previous. And in terms of the vendor that had the issues, I believe we've had the debrief, have we? No.
No, we haven't had the
complaint
debrief,
yet.
but they are engaged with us in other capacities. So there is an ongoing relationship there that is still healthy and productive.
And just one more, Chair. Is the person that emerged the last time as the sole bidder, Is it the same as
It
OnX?
is.
It is.
Yep.
Ms. Kostakis?
So Colin, just on page 3 of the report again, that nasty page, since it says that since there were only 2 proposals received, the other 59 suppliers that downloaded the RFP and did not submit a proposal were contacted to ask why they did not submit proposals. Can you speak a little bit to that? Because I think you only, to date, only 12 suppliers of those have responded. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so we tried to reach out to vendors because we are trying to get more competitiveness in this space. The 12 that, so you're going to have vendors that happen to download this, but they have no real bearing on the proposal, so they're not interested in responding to us about that conversation. Those that we did speak to, the issue is the ability to maintain or to field the entirety of the service offering with the level of integration that we were able to offer, or they were able to offer.
So you did put some effort as well to follow up with people that did not even submit.
Yes, and I think it's fair to say that we are certainly interested in creating more competitiveness in this space. We made some measures in bringing more players into this conversation, but in the next few years, we're going to go even further. And this is particularly true because we're going to be getting into more cloud-type offerings, which are easier to transpose and switch.
Vice Chair Nunziata?
Actually, that was one of my questions. But just when the chair asked you that question about what impact we'll have if we don't approve this, I didn't hear the answer on that one.
Okay. So what we're using this for is shifting from buying boxes and cabling and network services to buying a value-added support. And it's in that value-added support that we're using those services to modernize our infrastructure. We've had issues with our data center due to facilities issues, and we need to put a fair amount of effort into rebuilding that. I don't want to rebuild that data center as it was, because that's, as I say, 15-year-old technology. So what we're looking to do is rebuild it better and with more cloud integration and stronger security. We can't really effectively do that with the level of service and the type of service that we have now. Hence, moving from a V.A.R. to a V.A.R., or a vendor of record to a value-added reseller.
But if it gets deferred to a later date, so we can get more information.
So deferral or...
like deferral for a month?
If we defer it...
If we can get more information on it, what impact?
All the elements that we've just discussed are delayed by that period of time.
Okay. In the report, it does talk about the maintenance fees, what we increase in the 2023 operating budget, $184,300 higher than 2022, correct?
Yes. Safina, do you want to address it?
Yeah, we have in our 2023 proposal built in some inflationary pieces that would be in there as well.
Okay, and so that's already been built in, so there is an increase. And so would that be an increase yearly?
So the budget already contemplates annual increases that are based on contracts that are set out. So that would already be baked in, and I think that's certainly the important piece around this contract is everything here is subject to what's budgeted. And so right now, as Colin mentioned, this is all within current contract spend, and any incremental piece, including the inflation, will be built for it to be contemplated in the 2023 budget proposal and every year thereafter.
Okay, so we had 2 bids. Soft Choice, they met all the requirements.
They did not, no.
They did not.
No, they were the second vendor that was eliminated in the process.
So what was the total bid?
What was the total bid from Soft Choice?
Yeah.
We can't, we don't typically disclose the individual
Those are-
bids.
those are
It's all
in-camera
under a
questions.
blackout.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Ms. Kostakis, I think you have another question?
Yeah, just to follow up with what the counselor was saying too. So, and maybe leading to is, for me, the risk management piece of it. So if we don't go to cloud, is there risk of loss of data? And I would assume, I presume the budget with technology, allocating a budget where it's increased every year, is that I would assume is maintenance upkeep, but also in keeping with technology. So for me, looking at it from a risk management perspective, is it possible that if this does not move forward as it should, or the time factor, we have security issues, data loss, et cetera?
So
Is that feasible? Is that possible?
I would say that data losses are very unlikely. We're very careful about making sure that we are protecting our data. But the greatest risk that we're running is more a miss the boat risk than a sink the boat risk. What we're trying to do here is modernize our infrastructure. And generally speaking, technology costs in compute and network are going down over time on a per unit basis. So what we're trying to do is capitalize on that and reducing our overall cost because our consumption is going up. And we won't be able to avoid our consumption going up. That's just a fact that the world is becoming more digital, and we have to capture more digital information, and we have to store it for investigative purposes and as records of our behavior for transparency purposes. So the demand we can't control. But the supply, we need to be able to reduce the cost and improve the reliability and performance of those pieces. So the risk is the miss the boat risk of not being able to do that.
Further questions before we go to speakers? Any other questions? Seeing none, speakers. Mayor Tory?
Well, I find myself in a difficult spot here. I might just ask a question. Is there an abstention at this board as opposed to city council where you either, as Doug Ford once reminded me when we were debating years ago, there's either a red button or a green button. There is no abstention. I don't want to be responsible for having negative consequences, and I should say I have great confidence in Mr. Stairs and in our administration generally. I forget something you were addressing recently that wasn't even in your IT domain per se, and it was just so well handled, and I was so impressed, and I think I said so at the time. I forget what it was, but just something quite recent. I am very dissatisfied with this process, though. I feel that I am a steward here, as I am at City Hall, of the taxpayers' money, and I don't think there's anything going wrong with the taxpayers' money here in the context of there being some gross expenditure being made here that's way in excess of what was done before. In fact, the answer is quite the opposite, that we're at least holding the line and that there may be some benefits from that actually produce a financial benefit. However, I would say there are two things that I do take issue with, and I think they have to be sort of registered here respectfully. One, in a situation like this where you would have a process such as what unfolded, where first of all it's the same bidder as before, who got it basically on a sole source basis before. I realize it's because no one else could bid, and I don't want to go back and look at what the background of all that was, as to how that person ended up as the sole bidder. Then you have another bidding process, and admittedly tried to open it up in some respects by talking about the acceptability of other hardware and so forth and so on. But you then end up in a situation where indeed there are two people that bid, but then one gets disqualified on the basis of, I think, what you described as a fairly small, or some such wording that you used, that it wasn't a huge sort of matter. And that troubles me and in the absence of a fairness commissioner. And that's what these fairness commissioners are for, in circumstances where there is some, either a sole source or where there's something about the contest that you'd want to be able to reassure people that someone else took a look at it and said, you know what, all this was fair. The small thing that they got disqualified on was fair, and so on and so on. You know what that's all about. And I think if I heard the answer correctly, that the city's policy says those can be applied in instances of $5 million, let alone $186 million. And so I didn't even comment on the length of the time, but then I heard you say just a minute ago in the answer to a question that the technology changes and improves, and that's one of the reasons why you really don't strike while the iron is hot, and yet I see a 7-year contract here, effectively. And I say to myself, well, won't things continue to improve over that time? Because that's been the pattern. And I realize that the OnX people may have said they wouldn't bid if they couldn't get enough security of tenure to have 5 or 7 years, but nonetheless. The second concern that I have is that this report, and this is a concern that, is really just an inadequacy in the report, is that it just doesn't set out the benefits. It just doesn't. And I think the reader, who is not going to be, as you described it, an IT nerd, I'm certainly the furthest thing from that you'll ever get. And I as a steward, though, of the taxpayers' money, I need to know, and you gave a little bit of description, including a couple of examples, and I don't know, is that the same data center that had the flood or whatever it was up? Yeah, well, I mean, the notion it had a flood to me is not a reason to have this contract, because it had a flood for other, or whatever the hell it was, for other reasons. But anyway, the bottom line is you gave a couple of examples like that, but there has to be in these reports a more granular basis for people that are like us. And I won't castigate anybody else by saying they're, unable to sort of understand a lot of the complications of IT and, as you said, deep into the infrastructure as I am. But I just think it's important that non-IT people should be able to read this and sort of see we can understand clearly from this what the benefit is, as I said earlier, either from the standpoint of administering policing, the financial benefit, and or the policing benefit, because that's what we're here for. And so I will abstain from this because I think I concur in what it is you're trying to do. So in that sense, I don't want to vote against it. But I'm going to abstain because it's a kind of a way of, I guess, registering my concern with the process, which I don't think in this case the report was not adequate, and I don't think that the process followed was adequate in terms of being able to say to the people we're responsible to, we have had someone take a look at this in the circumstances and tell us that it was perfectly fair and that everything happened exactly the way it should have. And I think that's a very important thing when it's a contract of this magnitude, and given some things that have gone on, especially even in this area, in the city government, a long time ago, admittedly, but you don't forget those things because they leave a scar. They leave a scar with the public, too. And I'm not saying that's happened here. I think it sounds to me like it's been carefully dealt with. So those are my comments.
Vice Chair, did you want to speak? No?
What I was thinking of, maybe we can just defer it and get all the information we need.
Is your motion to defer it subject to a report from a Fairness Commissioner?
Yes. I think that would be appropriate.
Can I ask staff what the consequence of that is before we go down that road?
Given the previous request for looking at a Fairness Commissioner and the need to procure the Fairness Commissioner, I'd expect that would have a 4 to 6 month delay on this contract. And I'm unclear as to where that would leave us in the interim with the contracted capability. I might offer, if the issue is in the writing of the report and the level of exposition and the information in the report itself, to defer it and rewrite the report or resubmit would be more of a 1 month to 2 month time frame issue.
Further speakers? Yeah. Ms.
You know,
Morgan.
I'm not a techie by any means, but having worked in the justice system and having sat on committees with a view to, updating, information systems, I know that, as Mr. Stairs has said, there has been a fairly robust process, and maybe on a go-forward basis, the regulations do need to be amended as to when the Integrity and Fairness Commissioner come into play. But my concern is that the need for these augmented platforms, because information's power, and it also translates into a safety issue. And we've already seen with missing and miss when you do have certain elements of these platforms where A, they're not being utilized, or there's not the linkages that are required. So I feel it's really important to vote on this today. And in the future, I understand all the concerns about perhaps making it a more competitive space, whether or not that's going out to the community and asking what were the obstacles for not bidding, et cetera, which has been done. But today, I think it's, from a safety issue, important that we give the go-ahead. I don't think we can afford 6 months of waiting to have that kind of review take place.
Ms. Kostakis, would you like to speak? Mr. Morgan, do you want to speak? Okay.
Could I just make a suggestion based on what was just said, and I'm happy we should proceed with the vote, which is that we also just make a note in the minutes that we might have the staff look into why it would take 4 to 6 months to procure a fairness commissioner. I mean, this is part of the problem with government. And I understand part of it is that we're all concerned, and rightly so, about the optics when it comes to public sector procurement, the taxpayers' money. But the notion it would take 6 months to procure and get a report from a fairness commissioner, to me, is symptomatic of why there's a problem. It's crazy. But anyway, I just wanted to note that in the minutes so that we might take a look at that too, so that if some other future time we can get a fairness commissioner much faster and get a report written, and then we would all feel better about it.
I'll speak now. I have to admit I'm a bit torn after hearing everything and hearing from some of the mayor's questions and vice chair and recognizing the need to move forward. I balance all that with having extreme faith in you, Mr. Stairs. So that's why I'm torn. There are some concerns, but at the same time I have extreme faith in you moving this organization forward and think you're doing a terrific job at doing that. But I do highly encourage the service to nail down the fairness commissioner policy and bring it back to the board, because I've had some experience with that in the City of Toronto. I think it works fairly well, and when you engage them up front, of course you don't engage them at the end of the process, because if you engage them at the end of the process they can always look at it, but it's much better to have their guidance throughout the process. And I think the board has to set that policy, so I would highly encourage that be brought back. Deferring this, which was my initial thought, to get more information. Based on your answers, I'm not frankly sure how much more information that you can provide than what you gave us already today. But just for future thought, when you're looking at a couple $100 million almost in expenditure and like in a 4-page report, right? I think some of the questions what you've heard today is that there needs to be a little bit more meat on the bone for sure going forward. But I'm going to, and I understand the mayor is going to step out of this vote, so I'll call a recorded vote on this. But I'm going to support the report, but with some reluctance, I have to admit, just based on all of the questions. But my support really hinges on frankly my faith in you, Mr. Stairs. Okay, so I'm moving the report. Take a recorded vote. Those in favor?
So we'll call it. Chair, Mr. Morgan, Ms. Kostakis, Ms. Morgan have voted in favor.
Those opposed?
Mayor Tory, Vice Chair Nunziata,
Okay.
against.
Okay, that item carries, but that'll show you the split on the vote. So I think it's an important thing to think about going forward.
And Chair, sorry, Chair, if I could just stand on a point of order. My comments, my questions, and my vote were not meant to indicate any lack of confidence whatsoever, Mr. Stairs. I tried to go out of my way to say that on other matters, including these. But I just think, and I think due note should be taken that the 2 elected representatives that are here on this board voted against this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we are the financiers of this entire police service.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. 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 Okay, move forward to item number 3, Environics, and we have a deputation. Mr. Langenfeld, whenever he's ready.
Thank you, Chair Hart. So just going back on that item 2, if I understand the service's response on item 2, the almost $200 million contract is in part because of a flawed RFP being issued, and now we taxpayers are told that we're stuck with the consequences of those flaws. And contrary to what some have claimed, the service identified 0 consequences of not approving the OnX contract. And perhaps if the board had a 3rd elected official, as is required by the law, then like the other 2 elected officials, this would have been voted down. And who knows, maybe that would have swapped and changed the whole vote here. So here we see certainly legal consequences regarding to this illegal holding of a impersonation of a Toronto Police Services Board. Meanwhile, the service identified that this problem related to retaining everything indefinitely. Contrary to the service's response, demand can in fact be controlled to the extent that the police board has failed to properly direct how long police retain information. And I think I believe you're still holding carding information, which has been illegal for how many years now? Except we know, of course, that privacy laws do not permit police and governments to keep information indefinitely on the off chance that they might someday find a use for it. The whole point of the law is to avoid this kind of ridiculousness, let alone the fact that you're paying off somebody $200 million in order to make this happen. Moving on to item number 3, the environics analysis or analytics contract extension. Page 2 of the report tells how it was, quote, selected on a non-competitive basis as they are the only vendor for this type of data and products. Close quote. Seems to be a sort of a trend happening here. $837,508 for the full contract renewal with extensions to provide what?
Online maps on the TPS's website. And of course, that isn't even close to the total cost for that feature. That's $1 million for only one contract apparently needed to provide a little basic background information used to prepare those maps. And note that under financial implications on page 1, it indicates that this contract renewal represents a 48% increase in price from a $112,000 previously to $166,000 now. Exactly what does environics provide to Toronto Police that isn't available for free from the Canadian Government Statistics Canada? Don't we all assume that data from StatsCan is far more reliable? Exactly how many millions of dollars is it costing Toronto taxpayers for Toronto Police to provide those online maps? And how many individuals access that information each year? And more importantly, do they find it in any way useful? On page 3, it states that the $1 million, quote, demographic data covers average population information such as household size, housing, income, occupation, education, etc., close quote. How is that any different from the free use information that all Canadian taxpayers already pay StatsCan to prepare? Other than the fact that this is being updated perhaps monthly rather than every 4 years, what's the difference? And the reality is Toronto taxpayers aren't willing to spend $1 million so that some of the background information can be more up to date, because it really doesn't matter and make any difference on what that map looks like. And then the overarching questions, what crime reduction, law enforcement, police work has this multi-million-dollar project yielded to benefit Toronto taxpayers? What arrests or improved policing can be pointed to as coming as a result of these millions? What, could Toronto Police not figure out where the neighborhoods were so that they could assign neighborhood officers? Not without giving yet another $1 million to a private for-profit corporation in Toronto? It would be most interesting to see who else contracts with this company that is a beneficiary of such highly profitable contracts, now almost 50% more profitable than the previous contract, all at the expense of taxpayers. And I'd like to say, in response to the half hour that you folks spent backslapping each other at the expense of the public's time at the beginning of this meeting, I'll add, the public will far more likely remember Jim Hart as the fascist toady who, with a well-documented history of violating the rights of members of the public, ignoring the rule of law, and preventing the members of public from being heard.
Thank you, Mr. Langefeld. A pleasure as always. Board members, any questions on the report?
No.
Tory.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, just because no one has corrected the record, there is, in fact, I think, a duly appointed third member. He just can't happen to be here today. So that the suggestion made otherwise is Councillor Grimes, of course. And I also just want to put on the record that when Mr. Langefeld uses expressions like paying off and things like that, I mean, this is just, and the remarks he made about you, these are just completely unacceptable. But having said that, he's done for today. Well, for this item. My question on this one was a little different. I, unlike him, fully understand why this data, and I'm sorry to ask all these questions on process today, but I think these are important. This amount of money isn't that big relative to the overall budget, and certainly not to the last item. My question is a bit different. I wholly understand why this data and the beyond Statistics Canada data is very useful to the police in making really important decisions. My question is, did we check to see if the city itself is contracting for with these people, because there's reference made through here about how much we work with the city on this stuff. And I just worry that everybody's buying their own licenses, which has been the scourge of big organizations, is that you have 6 sets of people buying the same licenses, and they end up spending a lot more in that respect, not because it's not useful, but because you're not sharing information. Does anybody have the answer to that?
One of the very first steps we do before we entertain sort of what this is seen as a non-competitive is see if there are existing agreements to piggyback on. And so often what happens is if there is language that allows us to piggyback on a different contract, then we can, because then we're leveraging one kind of administrative process and a common set of tools. In this scenario, we proceeded because the piggyback language likely wasn't there, or they're not using it. But that typically is the very first thing we do, is confirm.
But that just isn't clear to me that it actually was done in this case. In other words, did we find out the city has a contract with these people that we might have piggybacked on, or that they even have some of this data? Because some of the stuff that's in here about demographics and household, constitution and so forth would strike me as something the city likely takes a look at from different standpoints as well, even with this firm.
We would have piggybacked if it was available. And so that is the very first step we do. We work very collaboratively with the city as well as other police services, because this vendor is not unique to us. And so had that been available, this border court wouldn't have necessarily been needed.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Ms. Kostakis.
Just to piggyback on the mayor's, I think the sharing of information, because I know with focus tables, et cetera, at the beginning too, even when we did touch base, there were some issues on confidentiality when it came to sharing data. So I'd be curious to know if that's also probably, or could be a reason for it, of sharing information, even if it's city and police or even other institutions.
Yeah, so if we have unique requirements and it would necessitate us to procure separately, absolutely.
Further questions? Speakers? No? Motion to approve. Oh, sorry, Mayor Tory.
No, I apologize, because look, I guess I'm even more focused on this stuff than normal, because I'm in the middle of budget meetings now, and it's a painful process. It's a painful process. The biggest single element of which is the police budget, and I want to see us spend every penny we can putting frontline people into the communities with the neighborhood policing and expansion of things like that. And so this is $187,000 or whatever it is, but it's just one of those things where I wasn't even clear on whether the piggyback was really not available, or whether we, and I just think we have to start looking at these things more and more and more, and the same with how we have a process for $187 million worth of computer technology. And it's just painful for me, because I sit through that $187,000 could be used many different ways if you could save some of that by piggybacking on the city's contract, and including policing, but also many other areas of city life.
Just to be clear, I'll just ask a follow-up question, sorry, that you checked on the piggybacking and it wasn't available in this circumstance. Is that correct? Did I hear that right or not?
I'm saying that's always our first step, and so in this scenario, that it would not have been available. Otherwise, we would always pursue that first.
Okay.
That would be it.
Thanks. Vice Chair?
Just on that point, so moving forward, can we have that information as part of the report? So we don't need to ask that question, we know what the response is.
Yes, absolutely.
I think that would help as well.
Yeah, there's a
Right?
number of key takeaways from the
Yeah.
previous report as well as this, in terms of kind of standard sections and inputs that should always be included.
That's a good point. Okay, seeing no other questioners, motion to approve item number 3. All in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Now we move on to item number 5, which is budget variance reports. The first deputant is Miguel. When you're ready, Miguel.
First of all, I want to congratulate Jim Hart for service in this board as the chairman, and for your patience. It's not an easy job to listen to moi. Anyway, good luck in your future endeavors. So on page 13 of this report, it says that, there is unfavorable variance of $4.6 million due to the cost of police to the Freedom Convoy demonstrations in the city of Toronto. One of the things that I read is that the city of Ottawa has reimbursed or give some money from the participation of the Toronto Police Services in the city of Ottawa. It's not a secret. I was there in Ottawa on day 2 of the violent police evictions. We are learning with great interest what the discussions are happening with regards to the Emergency Act. Well, one day we'll find out if this was worth it to invest Toronto Police Services money to in Ottawa. So on a good spin, and this is I'm putting you in notice that very soon we're coming back to debate the Toronto Police budget for the year 2023. Last time when I was here, I have a side conversation with member Lisa Kostakis, and she wanted to clarify if the mental health initiative is currently, as you know, unfunded. So in looking forward to the year 2023 discussions, I want to see this project pilot funded, because what happened is, where I live in Ward 13 is the largest concentration of indigenous peoples. And they need to have this service in view that some of them are living in the city parks. And I beseech the province, I asked the province, I asked the Mayor John Tory and the feds to accelerate housing so that my cousins, my friends have proper place to live, because this is a land after all. So I want to acknowledge also the neighborhood community officers in Regent Park. Yesterday we have a great time chatting and enjoying a delicious meal provided by Humanity, a partner agency that is was kind enough to supply us with meals for the residents of TCAC living in Regent Park, which is very important to understand that the roots of violence in this city is not because people they like to carry guns. It's because people live in extreme poverty, and we need to address those matters at the provincial and the federal levels, so that we have more more money to buy ourselves the proper meals that we deserve to have. So, oh yeah, and one last request. Is that possible that we could have a summary report of how much money the Doug Ford, the Premier, has funded the Toronto Police Services since the year 2018 when he was elected? There are numbers circulating out there that probably he has given to this service $300 million. So I understand that the guns and guns grants are at the amount of $3.4 million, and the community safety policing grants of $6.4 million on page 11 are really are basically included in this report, which is good to hear that by the end of the year, perhaps this board budget will not increase, or maybe 1.7%, as the mayor replied to Chris Langenfield when he attended the board meeting in the month of July. Well, anyway, that's it for me. That's my deputation. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. Any questions for Miguel? Ms. Kostakis?
So Miguel, do you want to be specific as to which pilot you were talking about? The Gernstein's 911, is that the one, correct, that you were talking about?
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Miguel. Appreciate it. Second deputant is Derek. I don't believe Derek is here, though. Hasn't called in, has he, Doobie? No, okay. Third deputant is Mr. Langenfeld, if you could put him on.
Thank you. I'm just looking for the okay, on item 5.1, the services operating budget, looking at table 1 on page 2 of the services operating budget report here, we see that Toronto Police are now expecting to receive $11.6 million in grants that weren't budgeted for, yet the net total is only $4.1 million improved. Reality being that, if not for having already received more than $11.5 million in extra money from the province and or federal governments, the truth is that Toronto Police expect to be $7.5 million over budget for 2022, and that in spite of the multi-million-dollar increase in the $1.1 billion 2022 budget over 2021. We look at the projected year-end actuals of recent budget reports, and we're looking at 3.8 to 3.4% increase here in the net budgeting from when we compare the 2022 budget amounts and the projected actual amounts for year-end compared to 2021. We're looking at 3.5% basically. And in the September 13th agenda, the services operating budget variance report projected before grants a $2.4 million unfavorable, in other words, over budget year-end based on the June 30th, 2022 figures. Now in November, the service expects to be $7.5 million over the 2022 budget, with only the receipt of $11.5 million in grants keeping the service's budget out of the red. So the question there is, why are the service's year-end budget projections $5.1 million more costly in September than they were at June 30th? Where did the more than $5 million go in July, August, and September? The report talks a lot about what was happening back in January and why there were actual, or February, I guess it was, when there were additional requirements to deny people their right to protest. But what was happening in July, August, and September that you're now $5 million over budget there? Looking at the officers, the uniform officers figures for salaries and premium pay from tables 2 and table 3, it's $11.1 million favorable for salaries, but $25.1 million unfavorable for premium pay. So $14 million over budget there in uniform officers. But when we look at back from the June 30th, 2022 figures from the September 13th meeting, at that point you were only going to be $10.5 million over budget. So they're apparently in 3 months now, all of a sudden, even overtime pay is $3.5 million more than what you figured you were going to be over budget 3 months ago. That begs the question, if the projection was at the end of the year for $10.5 million over budget on uniform pay based on June numbers, what is now expected to be $14 million over budget for the year based on September numbers, how large is the actual over budget amount for uniform pay going to be by the time we get to the end of December? Should we expect to pay another $18 to $20 million over budget for 2022, despite the already 3.25% budget increase from 2021 to 2022? How many tens of millions is it currently costing taxpayers to pay civilians and police officers to guard hundreds of other armed police officers in our police stations? I understand today there are more than a dozen civilian and uniformed officers there to protect you folks from the public you work for. Does this board not think that a budget should provide them with a report of that figure? That the tax-paying public should know that kind of information about where taxpayer money is going? Does this board not understand that that is the whole purpose of a budget? To know what things money is being spent on and what, if any, benefit is resulting from those costs? What benefit are these tens of millions of dollars giving Toronto taxpayers, other than reducing the amount of public involvement in police oversight, which the vast majority of the public agrees isn't to our benefit? I reserve the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Langenfeld. Any questions for the deputant? Seeing none. Questions on the reports? Board members, questions? Tori?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I don't want you to be thinking this is a conspiracy in your last meeting, but it is budget time. My questions are not, I mean, I think I've had enough experience in dealing with the incredible requirements that are requested of our police service to attend events and different things as we come out of the pandemic to know that, and the changing approach, I'll call it that sometimes, of service members with respect to paid duties and other kinds of things, to understand why there's, and combine that with what's very well explained in here, which is the higher than expected attrition from the police service, to understand why that would mean salaries would be down and premium pay would be up. And I think that, I guess, to offset my previous comments about the earlier report, that those things to me are well explained. I want to just ask a couple of questions about capital, if I can. Because we don't pay enough attention to capital, but it's just, again, money that's required, by the police service. First of all, I noticed the spending rates that are provided for here, and we went through this at the city where, year after year after year, depending what department it was, the spending rate was like 50 or 60%, and yet we were allocating very substantial amounts of capital when the spending wasn't happening. And so I look at spending rates like that, and admittedly, some of the ones that are, maybe you could just remind me what the overall spending rate is on capital, but some of the ones on these projects that are listed as red, so you'd expect the spending rates would be lower, perhaps. But I just wanted to sort of see whether you'd given any thought in the context of this year's budgeting and going forward to doing what we did at the city, which is to say, fine, if historically the spending rate has been at 60% or something, we're either going to get it up to 80 or higher, or we're just going to take that money out of the budget on the theory it's put in there and not spent year after year, because it then gets allocated and sort of frozen there under that heading. Have you given any consideration to that?
Yes, we have. Just last week, we went through every single project with a view of looking at the 2023 kind of 10-year plan, looked at where we're at this year and what our assumptions are, and where we can smooth out our spending so that we're more realistic in our budgeting. That is the exercise that's happening right now.
Okay. I just want to ask about the projects that are red, not specifically, although we could go through and talk about each of them for the two divisions being emerged and all that. I just want to know sort of more, what do we do with those? I mean, I saw, for example, the two divisions that were proposed to be emerged on the Danforth, and the thing has gone so out of control on cost now that I've got to believe that puts the entire project in jeopardy. And when do we sort of actually say, fine, that's what's happening here, and is it a matter of talking to the city, because we have interest in that too, given that it's more than just a police division? I just want to know in the long-term facility plan, the next generation, like these are all red, and what do we do with those? Do they just stay as red, depending what?
So specifically on the facilities ones, where there is a decision to be made, there is options analysis that's currently being developed, so we can put that forward to at least the command table by the end of the year, with an update then to the board early in the new year. On projects that are just red because they haven't been spent or behind some of the more technology ones, we are looking at staffing, we're looking at kind of the milestones and trying to make sure those no longer stay red. Some of the reason the projects are red is just underspending, and so that's attracting the right resource, skills, that type of thing. And so we are working closely with procurement to make sure we can accelerate the projects where this is just a resource shortage and really add additional capacity to actually execute on our objectives here.
Okay, and just two more, Mr. Chair, both relating to, there's one here, it's under the heading of debt-funded information technology modernization projects. I just want to ask the question, since I read this and I don't fully understand. I mean, when I say I don't fully understand, I'm not into but can I be assured that all of this stuff here that's listed under this heading is being coordinated with, and maybe in fact the beneficiary of, the previous discussion we had about the 186 million being spent, because this doesn't appear to have any connection to that, but I'm sure that it does in the broader scheme of things. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, so everything in the procurement that we're provisioning is tied ultimately to our budget requests between operating capital and so on.
Okay, and then the final question was just on the 911 next generation. I realize 911 and a data center are two entirely different things, but when we're doing a new data center, as was discussed, and when we're here, I see a construction for a secondary site, so we're having a backup, which is fully understood why you would obviously have to have a backup for 911. Do we take into account the opportunities to sort of look at these things in a kind of a combined way, and I don't mean necessarily that everything should be in one place. That can be very dangerous. But do we look at those kinds of things? Because sometimes I think we don't. And I say we, including the city government. Do we look at that and say, well, when we're building a secondary site for 911 and renovating the first site, that we look very carefully at where that's all going to be done on the basis of trying to maximize the benefit for the taxpayers' money?
Yes, so there's two exercises happening right now internally within the service. We are looking at our long-range facilities plan over the next 10 years, including the age of buildings and space and what's available and not. And we're working directly with Creatio on the city with them and coordinating because they too have similar exercises underway.
Thank you.
Further questions on the budget reports? I just have a very quick one. On page 2 of the operating budget, you project $4.1 million underspent at year end, which is pretty tight on a $1 billion budget. Can you just assure the board that you will be underspent at the end of the year?
We will be underspent, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Motion to approve the report. Ms. Kostakis, seconder. Tori, all in favor? Any opposed? That carries. We now move forward to item number 6, which is a semi-annual report publication of expenses. Deputations on that item. Miguel, you're up first.
So, Ms. Svina Devali, the interim chief administration officer, will be in attendance to answer any questions the board may have regarding this report, and of course, the public can ask questions to staff, but the chair has the privilege, or the mayor, of course, to ask the questions on behalf of the public. Chris Langenfeld touched a very sensible issue. When I came to this board in 2010, Chair Alok Mukherjee was the chairman, and at the time there was not extreme police presence at this civilian/police board. We now have 2 officers on the right, and I have a core officer on the left, and they both are busy checking out the social media status. There are also a couple of officers outside, around 10, 12, an average when I come to the board meetings. I wonder if this number of police officers at this board can be reduced, because you have the screen table downstairs. Chris Langenfeld has raised an issue that he doesn't want to get screened out because it is against his civil liberties. I understand, I respect that, but you know, once we get into the building, we're here to conduct a civilian-led meeting. I know that this auditorium serves as a disciplinary hearing, and I know when you go to the court hearings, they have officers in the court. But today, it's a civilian function, and I believe the presence of these officers is detrimental for taxpayers, because they're trying to figure it out. Why is there reasoning for them to be in this auditorium when they could be doing another jobs, helping out members of the community? I don't know, other duties to help the residents. So that's the first comment I would like to make to this board. When it comes to the disclosure list, I know the people on the staff, they had the right to spend up to a limited amount of money on education, on training, et cetera, travels, expenses. But it doesn't say nothing about the presence of these officers in this civilian-led meeting. So my request to outgoing Chief Chairman Jim Hart, and maybe you can discussions later. And I understand Doug Ford was in the building saying goodbye to you. I saw his picture, by the way. You know, there's no really, you know, we are not evil people. We just have a loud voice. We just want to express ourselves. You know me, 12 years on the street, shouting and screaming for justice. And here in this board, I lower my voice to become more acceptable and welcoming. I know sometimes my comments may spark a bit of reaction, and I have a conversation with Chief Rammer, outgoing Chief Rammer. He wishes me, that I continue working to build this service, a better police services. And hopefully one day, it's my dream that an Aboriginal person, an Indigenous person will be sitting on this table so that we can put reconciliation in everything we do. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you, Miguel. Any questions for Miguel? Thanks a lot, Miguel. Appreciate your deputation. Derek is not here, so the next deputant is Mr. Langenfeld.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Going back to item 5 there, we just got to hear the typical incompetent politician comments about how not enough money is being spent. No surprise that as we move into another budget preparation cycle, we see some pushing to spend even more of taxpayers' money even more quickly. Pretty sad. Moving on to item 6 here, the semi-annual report publication of expenses, January 1st to June 30th, 2022. I'm looking specifically at the report for Acting Deputy Chief Myron Demku. Looking there, he has for conferences and training, May 15th to May 19th in London, England, a Leadership in Counterterrorism Alumni Association that taxpayers had to pay $5,800 for. And then in addition to that, we have business travel for the week May 31st to June 4th. To San Francisco for the annual meeting of the Major Cities Chiefs Association. There we had to pay $3,200 plus. Seems like even back in May, the soon-to-be announced new chief was already being groomed into the corrupt practice of misusing taxpayer money in exchange for, well, we aren't really sure what kind of misbehavior to expect. We just know from past experience that there won't be any shortage of examples of it. So why did Toronto taxpayers need to pay over $9,000 to send an acting deputy chief on 2 separate one-week international vacations? Why wasn't this instead the person who we taxpayers are already paying to be at work, them sitting in the office that we already pay for, with them using the equipment that we know we consistently overpay for to connect to these meetings on Zoom or whatever? And I note that in response to a previous similar question, I got the ridiculous answer to the effect that these kinds of meetings discuss secret things where remote attendance would not be secure enough. And that, of course, begs the question, if you folks aren't capable of setting up a secure computer connection, why should those of us paying your salary imagine that you're capable of responding to terrorism or any other matters of law enforcement? Other than the acting deputy chief having an opportunity to go out for drinks with the boys each night after each of these meetings over those 2 weeks, what did Toronto taxpayers get out of the almost $10,000 vacation trips our tax dollars paid for? And what part of that couldn't have been better handled for free with an email or video chat? I hope I'll get an answer, although based on past experience, I know not to actually expect one. I reserve the remainder of my time.
Thank you. Any questions for the deputant? Seeing none. Any questions on item number 6? Anyone wish to speak to item number 6? Motion to receive item 6. Vice Chair Nunziata, seconder. Ms. Kostakis, all in favor? Any opposed? 6 carries. We now move on to item number 8, which is the correspondence to all Ontario Police Service Boards from Pauline Rochefort, Chair of the East Ferris Police Service Board. Any questions on I believe we have a motion that we're going to display?
We have a deputation.
Oh, sorry, we have a deputation. I missed that. So can we hear from the deputant, Mr. Langenfeld, first, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is correspondence about vehicles passing school buses and a request to have cameras, expended stop arms, and 360-degree cameras on all buses plus legislative changes to support fines and collection of those based on the cameras. And I speak here on this item as someone who spent over a year driving school buses every weekday here in Toronto. This has the appearance of yet another example of politicians and political appointees looking for a way to spend millions on technology and ongoing support of that technology as a substitute for having police engage in law enforcement activities. Of course, the result is yet another scheme to make sure that the rich can get away with ignoring the law in exchange for a few dollars that mean nothing to them, while taxpayers spend a small fortune to administrate yet another half-baked idea. It would, of course, cost us nothing to have the occasional police cruiser, who we're already paying, to stop ahead of school buses, as buses transport kids at 8 a.m. and 3 p.m., so that police can actually stop and ticket illegal drivers for their infractions. We know that at 8 a.m. and 3 p.m., police aren't actually active in a high crime time of the day, and police aren't typically particularly busy at those times. And Ontario's driver's license point system would then make sure that even the spoiled rich kids affiliated with the country's telecommunication behemoths and similar greedy corporations that bleed the people of our society dry would suffer some consequences for their crimes, such as risking running down school kids. And unlike the fine that secretly shows up in the mailbox a month after the fact, you can be darn sure that the public would quickly become aware of and adjust their driving habits as a result of police engaging in law enforcement. I'm sure that the press would enjoy having something to report to the public about somewhere where the billions of dollars we spend on policing is having some tangible effect. Of course, we know you don't generally answer anything raised here, or you often don't. I appreciate you having discussed the first two items I raised before completely ignoring everything. But in this case, why aren't we actually having the police officers that we pay for sitting in front of school buses ticketing people? Why do we need to, I'm going to assume that the motion is going to be for you guys to sign right on to this proposal so that we can spend millions more on upgrading, well, certainly hundreds of millions more, upgrading the thousands and thousands of school buses across Ontario to add cameras. And then, of course, you're going to have to pay another $200 million contract to hire the technology to retain that video information of every car driving on the street until the end of time, because you want to be able to track people, and you think that's okay because the law doesn't apply to you folks. I reserve the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Langenfeld. Any questions for the deputant? Seeing none. Questions on the report? I have one. If no one else, I'll ask. Yeah. Chief, can you just give us maybe perhaps the Toronto experience in this regard and what your thoughts are in general?
Yeah, actually, in light of the report that came in from the East Ferris Board, we just looked at some of our stats, and Lauren has those, and she can provide them. You gotta go up there.
So when we received the details of the letter, we actually looked at our statistics. So this year, to date, we've laid 84 charges with respect to fail to stop for school bus meeting, fail to stop for school bus overtaking, and fail to stop school bus owner. I just want to mention that those statistics are significantly lower than what we laid in 2019, simply because of the fact that we didn't have as many buses on the road with the pandemic. With respect to this, we're not looking to replace police. We still continue to enforce the things and the changes to the Highway Traffic Act. But what we would be looking for is to have a means to hold those drivers accountable. There are some concerns with respect to the amendment doesn't allow us to just lay charges to an actual driver of the vehicle, or the registered owner of the vehicle, not the driver. So there are some gaps there that we'd be lobbying to to have change as well, because the current legislation doesn't give us the same permissions as like a red light camera and automated speed enforcement camera.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Yep. Vice Chair?
So just a couple of questions. So what are the fines on the charges that are laid?
Sorry, Councillor?
What are the fines?
The fines are failed to stop for school bus. Or are you talking about
The
the actual
amount, yeah,
amounts?
the amount,
You know what?
yeah.
I don't have that in front
Oh,
of me.
you don't have
Sorry.
that?
No,
Oh.
I haven't. They're substantial, though.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, well.
Yeah, and this is aligned with our CFTOs, or sorry, our Vision Zero as well. So these are certainly concerning. This is concerning driver behavior that our police officers are looking into on a daily basis.
Yeah, so it would probably be doubled as we do when it comes to 30K in the Vision Zero. Double the fines, like a huge amount? Oh, okay, well, that's okay. Yeah, oh, you haven't written one.
haven't written any tickets.
Well, yeah, but my question is with what we have in the on the agenda today is that they're asking the Toronto Police Services Board to endorse this motion going forward to the province, correct? They're just asking us to.
Yeah, maybe
endorse.
I can be
Yeah.
helpful there,
Okay,
Madam
Ryan?
Vice Chair.
Yeah.
Boards across the province received this correspondence from the East Ferris Police Services Board asking their board to consider this particular idea. We consulted with the Chief's office and the service. We refined the motion that you'll see shortly, but in essence, it's based on the request from East Ferris, and many other boards across Ontario have already considered this.
And may I just add as well, the concern is that as a result of the changes to the amendments to the Highway Traffic Act, we haven't really seen a change in driver behavior. We continue to have a significant amount of fines still issued. So,
Thank you.
plus significant points. Yeah.
Any further questions? Anyone wish to speak to this before we put up the motion? Can we see the motion? We have one somewhere.
We'll bring it up now.
Okay, if everybody just take a moment to read that. This service has reviewed this motion, I understand, and concur. Is that correct, Chief? Chief? You concur with this motion, correct? If not, now's the time to speak up.
Yes, I'm good with that motion. I mean, I'll just add, this is a very significant issue. We've actually had prosecutors prosecute for dangerous driving when kids have been present. So it's not just the provincial offenses ticket that goes out. So anything we can do to prevent that and make the kids safer, is good. So.
Okay, board members, take a vote. All in favor of this item and the motion? Any opposed? That carries. Thanks very much. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I moved it. Did you second it? Perfect. Yep, sorry. Keep me straight. Good job. Okay. We have one last item, I believe, correct? Did you want to introduce this since you prepared it?
Yes, Mr. Chair. It's with regret that I introduced this, but as this is your as this is your last public meeting, we do need to put in place an acting chair and an acting vice chair. The acting chair piece is easy, but we're memorializing it with this motion because our bylaws say that if the chair can't fulfill their duties, the vice chair takes the position. So Vice Chair Nunziata would, just by effect of our bylaw, become the acting chair. So really what we need is for the board to approve an acting vice chair or an interim vice chair. And you'll see there that after consultation, the motion is that the board approve Board Member Ainsworth Morgan to act as the interim vice chair effective November 18th, 2022, and until a new vice chair is elected in 2023.
Thanks, Mr. Teschner. I would like to move this motion. First of all, I'm super happy that I'm leaving the board in terrific hands with my good friend, Vice Chair Francis Nunziata, leading the charge, and Mr. Morgan, who I have great respect for, a very thoughtful individual who will be great as the Vice Chair. So thanks to both of you for taking this on. So I would like to move it. Perhaps Mayor Tory would like to second it. Terrific. All in favor?
I concur in your comments.
Any opposed? That carries. Move to adjourn. Vice Chair Nunziata. Ms. Kostakis, all in favor? We stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone.